Hello, and welcome to Comic Community News. This is the show that lets you know the important things going on in the comic book community. I'm John from John's Comics with Kids, here with a special report. We're going to be talking to you about X-Men #1. I know, a new X-Men book just dropped this week, and if you want to know everything about why this book is important, what's going to happen in it, should you pick it up, is it worth the $4.99? Well, stick around for this spoiler-free discussion. John, we're throwing it to you. Thank you, John. Yes, that's right. X-Men is back. Didn't really ever go away, but Jonathan Hickman is passing the reins of the X-Men title over to Jerry Dugan, and it starts now. Issue #1 just dropped at your LCS this week, and I'm here to give you a little bit of a breakdown of this book, a little bit of a review about whether or not you should pick it up, a little bit of information on, is this a spec book? Is it worth even picking up if I'm not reading X-Men? And a little look ahead at what might this book mean for the upcoming Hickman universe. First up, let's talk about where Hickman's universe is right now. We are 2 years in. We have gone well beyond the Hox-Pox origins of the Hickman universe. And now here we are, the passing of the reins and the creation, for the first time ever in Hickman's run, of an actual X-Men team. Now, some of you who haven't been reading X-Men might be like, wait a second, there's been an X-Men book this whole time, John. What are you talking about? No. That has been sort of Hickman's scattershot look at the entire mutant universe, a non-continuation sort of based comic book where they looked at all the different storylines in the Hickman universe and pinpointed certain little stories within that world. It has not been a consistently team-led comic book, and in fact, a lot of the complaints about Hickman's X-Men title have been that it's not a single storyline that you can just read. It taps into lots of the different books that are being published in the mutant line. So what does this mean? Does this mean Hickman is out? Does this mean that the X-Men universe under Hickman is done? No, not at all. In fact, in many ways, this reporter feels like this was kind of the goal, that Hickman was going to relinquish this title at some point when the creation of an X-Men team felt important to the Hickman story. And right now, that time is happening. Certain huge events, whether part of the Hellfire Gala or the Ten of Swords, have led to the moment when several key X-Men characters, specifically Jean and Scott, have decided that they need an X-Men team both for themselves and for the world at large on planet Earth. So here we have Jerry Dugan taking over and starting off a new run with an official rostered team and setting up a storyline that might be more pleasing to a traditional X-Men reader. So besides Jean and Scott, who all is on this team? Well, certainly you've got Rogue, the powerhouse superhero, on the team, definitely lending a lot of strength. We've got Synch, a very underappreciated mutant with the ability to sort of synchronize his mutant powers with another mutant. So if he is standing around Rogue, he can take on some of her abilities. Standing around Scott, he can absorb and use some of his abilities without harming the other person. Maybe a mutant you haven't heard of if you haven't been reading mutant books in the last few years. Of course, then we have Sunfire. Sunfire, character thrown back to the original heyday of the mutants and X-Men. I don't particularly like this character, but I am curious to see how they use him in this run. We've also got Polaris, popular daughter of Magneto here. And lastly, we've got Laura Kinney, X-23, or the all-new Wolverine, as I like to think of her. So a nicely well-rounded team, some tanks, some magic users, and of course, we've got the leaders in Jean and Scott at the front lines. So what is this all going to mean for a comic book read? Let's throw this over to a review. John? Thank you, John. Yes, as a review for this book, I have to say, slightly underwhelming overall, this issue #1. There are many reasons why, but chief among them, as I have become a reader of a lot of #1s in these few years doing YouTube, issue #1s for Marvel and DC are incredibly hard. The editors clearly have all of their little fingers on these, and never has one of these stories been sort of a singular vision. And that's kind of seems to be what's happening here. A lot of input from the outside seems to be happening, and Jerry Dugan's just trying to get all these pieces in place. I have a feeling that given a few more issues, a sort of streamlined style might begin to emerge, but for right now, this is a very disjointed issue number 1. As a team, I like this roster. I think there's a lot of great personalities, but sadly, this issue number 1 doesn't give us a lot of time to get to know them on their personal level. The one character who gets their most amount of time would be Scott, so fans of Cyclops like myself, sorry JP, will get a little chance to see an insight into how he thinks. I love the way they use classic Marvel journalist Ben Urich here. If those of you Daredevil and Spider-Man fans might remember Ben, he shows up at the beginning to interview Scott, and there's a great little balance of, I got deep, hard-hitting questions, and also, I really appreciate what you're doing, back and forth discussion going on between these two characters. It's a great setup to the issue without giving us a ton of boring exposition. And I do like the back and forth where Scott just knows he can't open himself up and speak too freely, but at the same time, he really wants the people of New York to appreciate the fact that they now have a new superhero team centralized right there in downtown Manhattan. But more than that, my favorite reveal is the X-Men have a treehouse, y'all! They have a treehouse base. This might be one of the coolest Marvel bases that I've ever seen a team have. And to have it be right in downtown New York, the whole thing, it's like part outreach to the community, part base of operations for this new team. I really, really dig this base. The design is given several great panels to kind of give us a little information about how this will operate within the flora and fauna of Krakoa and how that connects them to the island. So definitely digging on that design. I think it's really clever. And of course, this book is full of the action you would expect from an X-Men book. Giant alien coming to Earth has sort of an Incredibles kind of vibe going on here, and the team rolls into action in a big way. Some fun reveals of how they deal with this creature, and I don't want to really spoil any of the action because I do think it's some of the best stuff. Pepe Larraz is a great artist. I enjoyed his Hoxpox work. I've enjoyed his stuff on X-Men before this. And of course, right here in this issue, he highlights how to draw superheroes in action really, really well. But what else is hurting this book? I do think it has an overabundance of setup. I think there's at least 4 different villains given a little moment to say, oh, we hate the X-Men here, we got a plan coming. I don't know how many villains you need to have in a single comic book, but this book definitely tries to pack them all in. I also think these are all, at least for the most part, first appearances because I've never heard or seen anything of these villains before. I even tried to do a little bit of research online to see if I could find anything, and I was just left with a complete blank slate. Now, whether these amount to anything, I don't know, but I'm going to throw that over to our spec analyst, John. Thank you, John. Yeah, that's right. There are spec alerts going on around this book right now. Lots of interesting characters appearing for the first time. Let's talk about Kelvin, this sort of vision-looking character who had an obsession with colonizing Mars for himself. But after Planet-Size X-Men, when the X-Men have colonized Mars, he's kind of out of luck, and he's going to now take that anger out, possibly on our team. Yeah, Kelvin Hang has an interesting look to him, but I've never heard of the character before. If he is somebody that you've heard of before, please drop me a comment because I want to know. We've also got the mysterious alien creature that the X-Men fight in this issue, which is of a species I've never seen before. So it's possible the species is getting its debut in this issue as well. Then we go to Game World, which appears to be what Mojo's world has evolved into. And without Mojo in charge, we have a new sort of villainous person manipulating what's going on here. And that character is Cordyceps Jones, which sounds a little like that Osmosis Jones, that horrible movie from back in the early 2000s. Yikes. But no, Cordyceps Jones seems to be living inside of an astronaut in some manner, like a fungus of some sort, and then manipulating a contest to see who can take over Earth without wiping out the planet's inhabitants. Very interesting. Doesn't want to spoil the planet's resources, but does want to conquer it. And they're treating it like a sort of contest and who can do it. So there's another villain to be thrown in there. Then lastly, we have the mysterious Dr. Stasis, who seems to be running some kind of experiments in a lab to discover how are mutants regenerating. Mutants can die, of course, in Hickman's universe and be reborn. This scientist seems to want to crack the powers of this and use it to help people fighting the X-Men. So lots of villains going on here. No big last page shocking villain reveals, thank goodness, but a ton of side plot going on here that felt like it was sort of crammed into this issue. So spec-wise, maybe you want to grab a copy for that, but at the same time, there is a shocking amount of covers and variants and ratio variants and things going on here, so finding the one that's going to be the one that pops is a little bit challenging. My recommendation is just enjoy the book if you want to check it out, because there's a lot of cool things going on here. But let's hear a little bit about if this is even worth the money. John, what are your thoughts on that? Right you are, John. It's important to know when you're going to your LCS and spending something like $4.99 for this book, is it worth the time and money? And I will say definitively for $4.99, basically what you pay for one of those cardstock variant DC books, you're getting a ton of reading here. This book is packed. It's a very hefty read with lots going on, quality artwork, and several first appearances. So if you add all that up, in my opinion, it means yes, this book is worth the $4.99. Story-wise, I'd probably give this a 7.5 out of 10. Definitely not the home run that I was hoping it would be, but also my expectations are pretty low when it comes to a Marvel or a DC #1. I think in general, those are very difficult books to nail, and a lot of comics blow it. So I was expecting more from it. Definitely not a really great book, but at the same time, there's a lot of potential here. I love the artist. I like Jerry Dugan. I think he's been doing some of the most consistent work at the X universe these days. So I am hopeful that he can turn this into something fun and funny. It seems like the perfect book for him, a great mix of his humor and action style. And as long as Hickman is overseeing it, because he still gets credit as head of X in this title, and it's definitely still got the style of Hickman with the great, like, big info pages and the graphics and things. So it still feels like it's part of this universe. So in that way, it feels like Hickman's still involved, even if he is not overseeing every little minute detail. So would I recommend it? Certainly to X-Men fans, definitely. For people who are like, can I use this as a jumping on point? I think so. There is a ton of weird villain stuff thrown in, but the truth is, it was weird for me because these are all new characters. So for a first-time reader, I think in that way, you might be able to get into it. Is this going to win over a whole new audience to the X-Men? Absolutely not. I think they're going to need a few more issues that build on what's here and give us insight into some of these characters, because this issue does not spend enough time on character for this reporter. All right, let's go back to you, John. Thank you, John. All right, so that wraps up our X-Men breakdown. A 7.5 out of 10. Not a great read overall. Setup is quality, art is really good, some ideas that could really evolve into something special. This reporter says, if you're an X-Men fan, definitely check it out. There's no rush. I don't think this book is going to sell out anywhere. There will be plenty of copies of issue #1 to be had in the near future by you. But if you think you might want to try X-Men for the first time, beware. I don't necessarily think this is going to be the book that wins you over to Hickman's universe. That's going to wrap it up for us. This has been Comic Community News. I'm your host, John, John's Comics with Kids. We're part of Tag Team Thursday. I put the links to a lot of really great channels down below that you should check out. Make sure you take the time to hit the notification bell, the like button, and the subscribe button, because we appreciate it when you come by and check in on what we're doing, and that notification bell is very key in knowing when we drop new content. Thank you, everyone, and stay classy, comic book community.